Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope you are having a fabulous day already. If you have just stumbled on my page, my name is Donna. I am a mom, a nana, a grad school student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, a jazzercise junkie, a runner, an activewear fanatic, and also a part-time employee for NAMI of Citrus County, NAMI Citrus County, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I started Wellness Wednesday because I believe that sharing peer wisdom is definitely a way to help us on our journeys. I have had a lifelong journey with depression and anxiety, and I find it helpful between that and my studies to get on here and share what kinds of things helped me in my journey. And of course, you are encouraged to interact, ask questions, make comments, to give tips of your own if you have some that you think will be helpful. With that said, Facebook doesn't always show me all of the things. So please, if I don't respond to your comment, good morning, Danielle, or don't recognize you, it's simply because Facebook didn't show you to me. And that happens from time to time. I see some things, but not always all the things. So be patient with me. Also, my little disclaimer for today is that I spent the entire weekend outside helping with a major local event. And as such, my allergies are trying to turn into something other than annoying. So if I sound a little funny or if I have to stop and cough, I apologize. I'm fighting it with my own methods. If you want to know more about those, send me a message. Okay, so last week, we touched a little bit on spirituality and the differences and the similarities between spirituality and religion. If you did see it, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't see it, let me know and I will drop the link in the comments, or you can go to the videos on my Facebook page and find it, scroll down my feed, whatever. And it's last week's talk about spirituality. Today I want to touch a little bit on relationships. I've been stewing on this one for a while. Somehow I had it in my notes. I keep a note so when I come up with ideas, I can put them down. Danielle, I don't know if I said good morning to you, but good morning. In any case, I thought red light, green light was an interesting way, kind of a fun way to introduce it. It kind of puts you, excuse me, in mind. Here we go. Hopefully this won't be a theme through the whole thing. Kind of puts you in mind of an old childhood game, which is sometimes what relationships can seem like. So also in conjunction with this, I was thinking about the 3-part series on bullying that I did a little over a year ago, which covered childhood bullying, it covered relationship bullying, and it covered workplace bullying. So if that's something you're interested in and you would like to see those, let me know. They're a little over a year ago, so it would take some scrolling through my videos, but I'd be happy to find them and tag you in them, share them to you in Messenger or whatever, because there's some important information in there. So we're going to dig a little bit more into relationship red flags, which can sometimes have to do with bullying. And today we're going to look at some of the bad, the good, and a little of how to handle it. So for the sake of today, relationships definition. There's a lot of definitions for the word relationship. But for today, we're going to go with 2 of these, which is how 2 or more concepts, objects, or people are connected, or the state of being connected, or in simpler terms, a connection, association, or involvement. So what this means is that relationships are not just romantic. Relationships are the interactions and the connections that we have with family members, friendships, acquaintances, colleagues. All of these are relationships, and all of them can have red flags and green flags. So the ones I'm going to talk about actually do occur. Good morning, Miss Carla. Actually do occur in all types of relationships, some more than others. But they can actually occur in all types of relationships. So red flags or red lights, we're using that synonymously today, indicates potential aggression, victimization, or abuse. And the number one I'm going to start with is codependency. And the reason I'm going to start with that one is because it tends to branch off into all types of relationships. And it also tends to kind of precede all of these other things we're going to talk about. And also because last weekend, not last weekend, that was the event, the weekend before, my boyfriend flipped on the TV and got into the Hangover movies, of which I had not previously seen all of them, or all of each one even. So I kind of got sucked into the Hangover movies, and then he fell asleep and the third one started, and I had to shut it off, and we watched it together the next day. Because if I hadn't shut it off, I would have been up half the night. If you've never seen the Hangover movies, you may not understand this reference. They're a little weird, but they're funny. And if you have, then you're going to understand my reference to Alan. So in terms of codependency, Alan from the Hangover may be a bit of an extreme case, but we need a little bit of a laugh with this, right? So Alan was so needy and so desperate to have friends, and he's becomes part of this bachelor party excursion because he is the brother of someone, or the soon-to-be brother-in-law of someone in the movie that's getting married, hence the bachelor party. And Alan is so desperate to make friends and hang out with these people that he actually drugs them to guarantee they'll have a good time. So again, kind of an extreme case, but maybe a little bit of a red flag, right? So codependency generally, it can refer to a couple of different things. And a lot of times codependency is used in terms of substance abuse where, or even abuse where we allow the behavior and maybe even feed the behavior even when we are the target of the behavior. And that's not necessarily what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about today is codependency in terms of if you can't get through an hour without having a conversation, like even at work, without having a conversation with your significant other, if you can't focus on things that are salient and important in front of you without having a conversation or a phone call or a constant text back and forth, then there might be some codependency in that relationship. If you basically can't function through the day without constant interaction with the other person, that may be a little bit of a flag. Now, with that said, there are some disclaimers to all of these. Couples that have been together for years and years and years have become very reliant on each other, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, though, as I said, when you can't function through basic daily things without having to have constant conversation or touch with that individual. So codependency can be a red flag, especially if it starts very, very, very early on in the relationship. Like if you can't move or breathe without having to be in touch with this person, it may be a little bit too intense for something that's just starting out. Which leads to the next one, which is overtly controlling behavior. Sometimes this codependency is bred from a need to, and we are talking about romantic relationships here, but keep in mind that codependency can happen all the time within family members, friendships, etc., especially in terms of substance abuse. In any case, codependency can sometimes be a signal of overtly controlling behavior. Is it codependency, or is it a situation where one person in the relationship just has to constantly know and be aware of what the other one is doing? So overtly controlling behavior might look like, what are you doing now? Who's with you? Where are you? All of the time, where you can't even function without having to basically report in, for lack of a better way to put it. Now, if you are an older adult, and I'll include myself, I'm 50 now, and I sound like, like I just rolled out of bed because of whatever's going on here. So if you're an older adult and you've had a medical incident or something of that nature, and you're venturing out, or a nasty accident and you're venturing out for the first few times by yourself, your partner, friend, close friend, family member may be concerned about you. I know I probably do that to my daughter, even though she's grown sometimes. If something has happened to her, she's been sick, whatever, I have a tendency to be like, how are you? Is everything okay? Did you do this today? But what we're talking about here in terms of overly controlling behavior is that feeling of having to report in, that feeling that you can't move without having to tell the other person what you're doing. That is overtly controlling behavior. If you're being told who you can and cannot hang out with, if you, and this can happen in friendships too. I've seen it many times, especially in friendships between women, more so than men, where, although Alan from The Hangover, again, great extreme example of what can happen here, where even women can be jealous of other friends. And I used to be like that. Years ago, I used to think that I could only have one best friend. And subsequently, that meant that she could only have one best friend also, and that was me, right? So I would get very jealous when my friend, whoever the bestie was at the time, was hanging out with somebody else. But what I never did was, hey, what are you doing? Hey, who are you with? Hey, why are you doing that without me? That was never my MO, but I have seen it happen in female friendships. And I've also seen it happen many, many times in romantic relationships, intimate relationships. So, overtly controlling behavior can be a huge red flag and a signal that there's a lack of trust there, or that there's something coming down the road if somebody's acting like that, especially right out of the gate. And again, this is a lot of these are tied in together. The next one it ties into is a lack of trust, jealousy, or assuming the worst. So again, we can kind of make fun of Alan from The Hangover here, because in the second movie, when somebody else's brother became involved in the bachelor party shenanigans, he became very jealous of that other individual, which again, extreme case, resulted in Alan drugging some marshmallows to basically make that person pass out so they couldn't participate, which resulted in yet another hangover escapade. So again, extreme case, but it makes a little bit of light on this just to kind of give us a giggle on what is potentially a very serious subject. So lack of trust, jealousy, assuming the worst. This is tied in with overtly controlling behavior, and is often the underlying nature of that overtly controlling behavior. Lack of trust might mean that you're constantly being accused of having something going on with the person you're working with, or a person you see on a regular basis inadvertently, even if there's absolutely nothing going on there. Not trusting you to be able to even be out of the house without supervision, those types of things. And jealousy is a touchy subject, because generally jealousy is a sign of mistrust, but sometimes it can be a sign of other things too. Sometimes it can be a direct result of past transgressions. If you have done something that you shouldn't have done in a relationship and you're getting the jealous act afterwards, then clearly that situation's not been dealt with. That other person's trust has been broken. They have not been able to get it back. So that can be a very sticky subject, because you've actually given that person a reason. But if that part of the relationship hasn't been healed, it can transpire into something more. And then again, assuming the worst. Assuming the worst is tied into that. What I mean by that is, if a person goes for 2 hours out of contact for whatever reason, their phone dies, they're in a meeting, whatever, and all of a sudden they're not answering, sometimes that assuming the worst. I know I've been guilty of it with my daughter. Don't hear from her 2 hours. Now, this was when she was younger. I've gotten better about it as an adult. Don't hear from her for 2 hours. Instead of assuming she's busy at work, I might assume I've made her mad. I might assume now that might be the case. When she was younger, if I didn't hear from her for 2 hours at 11 o'clock at night, I had visuals as an overreactive mother sometimes of her laying in a ditch somewhere, right? So those would be normal reactions, but assuming the worst can actually really, really get out of control, especially if we're dealing with anxiety, where we make up something in our heads, where we think that this is the reason why somebody's not answering or somebody's not showing up when they're supposed to. And it just spirals out of control when it might be the furthest thing from the truth. But assuming the worst often kind of goes hand in hand with jealousy. Oh, well, you're late at work. Are you blah, blah, blah with so-and-so type of jealousy? Or in the case of a friendship, oh, well, you didn't answer me for 2 hours. You must like her better than me. I've actually seen this kind of thing in action. I can't say I perpetuated it verbally, but I can remember a time in my life, like I said, when I thought that I could only have one best friend at a time, and therefore she could only have one best friend, which was me. I can remember thinking, oh, she must like that person better than me. I was in a different mental space at the time, but it's a great example of what can happen and how that can transpire in other relationships. Assuming the worst can also come along with familial relationships. For example, I have family members who are very, very wrapped up and involved in what's going on in their worlds. They're kind of in survival mode. They take care of their children. They go to work. They're just basically trying to get through the day. And I sometimes get frustrated when I text them and I go days, weeks, if ever I get a response. And it's easy to assume the worst, like they don't want to talk to me or I've done something to upset them, when in fact they're just in survival mode and they're not dealing with anything except what's right in front of them, which is not a text, because they can delay the answer on that and then they move on and they forget about it or whatever. So assuming the worst, while it can be a symptom or a red flag, there can also be a reason behind it, and keep that in mind because we'll get into that in a few minutes. Narcissism. So narcissism is really slippery. And the reason that narcissism is really slippery, and it's not something I want to dig too deep into today, is that there is narcissism proper, and then there's what everybody else thinks it is. Somebody that's self-centered is not necessarily a narcissist. Narcissism is an actual diagnosis in the DSM-5, which is the American Psychological Association. I just lost it. Diagnostic something. I just forgot what DSM stands for. Diagnostic manual, diagnostic something. I just lost it. Usually I have it right here in front of me, so just can't make words this morning. In any case, it is an actual diagnosis. It is an actual disorder that is diagnosed in the DSM-5. But it is not necessarily just somebody that's self-centered and thinks about themselves a lot. I've known self-centered people that were not narcissists. So it's very sticky as far as what it looks like versus what it actually is. But narcissism can involve a lot of these following items I'm going to talk about. True narcissism, which the first one I'll talk about is emotional or mental abuse and gaslighting. Good morning, Miss Barbara. Nice to see you. So emotional or mental abuse, as you know, can be just as dangerous and just as damaging, if not more so, than physical abuse. Physical abuse leaves outside evidence. Emotional and mental abuse does not leave outside evidence, and it can carry for a very, very long time. And in my opinion, emotional and mental abuse is usually a byproduct of physical abuse as well. In any case, gaslighting falls into this category. If you are constantly being made to feel guilty, or feel bad or feel responsible for someone else's actions, you are being gaslit. That is a very layman's term of what gaslighting looks like. And that's where it can fall into that emotional or mental abuse category. If you are constantly being put down or being told or made to feel like you're not good enough, picked on, ridiculed within your relationships. One of the stories I like to tell, and if you've been following me for a while, you know this story, you may remember, I talked about it in the bullying videos too, was a friend of mine quite some time ago who, for whatever reason, every time we got together, whether it was just the two of us, or Carla, I'll dig a little bit more into that in just a second, whether it was just the two of us or whether it was a group, but even more so if we were in a group, she would make fun of me. She would constantly poke and dig at me. I was seeing a younger man at the time. And I don't know what the situation was there, but her picking at me seemed to make her feel better, but it didn't make me feel very good. And she was constantly singling me out in front of other people, making comments about my younger boyfriend, my weight, how I looked, etc. Most people would be inclined to just say it was a jealousy issue. It became very damaging. That's a small example of the type of emotional and mental abuse that can happen in a non-romantic relationship. But those kind of things can definitely also happen in romantic relationships as well. And they also frequently happen in familial relationships. So emotional or mental abuse, gaslighting, these are red flags. Now, just a reminder that if you're seeing any of these very early in a relationship or a friendship, that's a signal of a problem. We're going to talk about how to deal with that in just a minute. Back to the gaslighting for just a minute. Another example is that I have someone close to me who, whenever an argument or something came up within her family, particularly with her husband, the men in the family would kind of band together, and whatever female it was in the family that had the issue at the time, the men in the family would just kind of conglomerate together, whether it was by text, by phone, in person, and all of a sudden that female in the family that had the issue was crazy. And that's all they talked about, was that person was crazy and why they were crazy. And again, there's that, Carla, if that helps you even more, there's that another example of how to make somebody feel less than, or somebody to feel responsible or guilty for some of their actions. So just for example, if this female in the family, accused her husband of saying something or doing something or not doing something or whatever the case may be, really doesn't matter, the subject matter. And then all of a sudden, all the men would gang up on them and call them crazy for thinking that or saying that or believing that or whatever. That is another layman's terms example of gaslighting. So chances are, if you have a narcissist in your life, again, not necessarily the same thing as self-centeredness. If you have a narcissist in your world, they are gaslighting you on a regular basis. If you try to talk to them about the issue you have with them, they're telling you it's your fault or telling you it's because of you. And it's a continual cycle that goes on. And it does absolutely fall into the category of emotional and mental abuse. We already kind of touched on substance abuse. But this is often the case in narcissism type situations, codependency type situations, or emotional and mental abuse type situations. Physical abuse is notwithstanding. Obviously, if you have physical abuse at the beginning of a relationship of any kind, then you should run as far as you can, as fast as you can. It's a lot easier to get out of that in the beginning than it is any further in. But generally, physical abuse is not something you're going to see in the very beginning of a relationship. You're going to be into that relationship. And physical abuse is rarely something you'll see in a friendship, sometimes in a familial relationship, depending on the situation. If you're an adult, more often in a romantic relationship, or if you're younger, in a familial type relationship, if abuse is something physical abuse is something that's been going on a while, which is why I'm not touching too much on physical abuse today, because that's a little bit of a different animal. But substance abuse can cause a lot of that, and it can also trigger that codependency. So if someone is abusing emotionally, mentally, gaslighting or whatever, but maybe they're only doing it when they're drinking, or they're only doing it when they're smoking pot, marijuana, whatever the appropriate term is for it now, then there's a substance abuse problem there. And continuing to enable that by providing them with what they need that turns into that is a symptom or sign of codependency. See how this can all be intertwined? Anger management. Anger management is something that can tie into all of these. Emotional, mental abuse. If somebody's got anger management problems, they may just be going off on you for no apparent reason at any given moment, yelling at you. All of a sudden they explode over some small issue. And that might be a sign that there's more to come, especially if it's in the beginning of a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship. You won't see this as often in friendships. But I can remember when I was a kid, and I've told this story before too, that I got into a punching habit for a while. It was a bad habit. My dear friend at the time, we would be walking along, and I don't even know where I picked this up, but we would be walking along and she would say something funny and I'd punch her in the shoulder. And I'd, going along and she'd say something else funny and I'd punch her in the shoulder, or I'd make a joke and I'd punch her in the shoulder. And finally one day she said, "Stop it." And I said, "Stop what?" I didn't even realize I was doing it. She said, "Stop hitting me." So again, you can see this in other things besides romantic relationships. Good morning, Miss Angela. And of course I was a kid at the time. And she said, "Stop it." And again, because I didn't really realize I was doing it, a little bit of time passed, and sure enough, next thing she said that was funny, or I make a joke and I punch her in the shoulder. And she wailed my shoulder back. And that was the end of that. It's not something I recommend. I don't recommend greeting violence with violence. In this case, I wasn't paying attention. clearly, or listening or paying attention to what I was doing. And when she punched me back in the shoulder, it was hard enough that I didn't do it again. I got the point. But again, don't necessarily always recommend greeting violence with violence. And this is something you're not going to commonly see in a friendship. This is something that's going to be more often seen. Physical abuse is going to be more often seen in a familial relationship or a romantic relationship. And it generally comes along with anger management issues. So if somebody is exploding on you for no apparent reason or for something very small on a regular basis, or they are throwing things at walls, putting holes in walls, punching walls, throwing things purposely so that they miss you narrowly, those kind of things, that's a sign of more physical abuse to come. That's a sign that there's a bigger problem there. And it's probably, and especially if it's early on in a relationship, it's probably not going to get better. That's a definite indicator that they have anger management issues. Other tip-offs. Now, okay, I will grant you, any of us can develop a significant amount of road rage on any given day, depending on what's going on the road. But routine and regular road rage, exploding over small things, explosive attitudes, and like I said, punching walls, throwing things so that they break, or throwing things purposely so that they narrowly miss you and thinking it's funny. That's a that's like a line of red flags, a line of red traffic lights that say stop, run, get out. Because there's more usually to come behind that. Isolation. Isolation is another red flag. If you have an individual in your life, and this could totally be a friend or a family member, that is constantly trying to isolate you from other people, other friends, other family members. If your significant other doesn't want you to spend time with your family without them, or they say things to your family members about you that make it sound like you might be a little bit crazy or extra mean. If they're telling bad things to your family members about you, that's a red flag. Because one of the things that narcissists do, and also that abusers do, is one of their power moves is to isolate you from your tribe, to isolate you from people you trust that will provide a support system, or possibly push back on them if they are out of control. So isolation is definitely a red flag. And if you find that, especially in a newer relationship, again, even in a friendship, sometimes in a familial thing, that you are things are constantly coming up where you can't get together with family members, or you're not allowed to be around family without them, maybe because they fear that you're going to say something negative, or that your family members are going to say something negative about them. This is a red flag. Isolation is, if the isolation is happening because someone else is doing it, that is always a red flag in a relationship. Bashing, gossiping, or how they treat others. So let's face it, if you have been in long-term relationships before your current one, more than likely your ex is going to come up, okay? It's just a thing. If you spent any amount of time, my boyfriend was with his wife for 22 years. The last relationship I had before him was for 10 years. It's a small town. A lot of past history was intertwined with these people. So exes are going to come up. It's a fact. But if the person you're around is bringing up their ex constantly in a bashing, gossiping form, where they're just constantly bashing that person, that can be a sign of a problem. Friends who all right, we have close friends, right? If you were my close friend, I might talk to you, maybe not always in the most positive manner, about other people because I trust you, and maybe you're the one I vent to. But if every time you talk to someone, they are bashing someone else, there's a really good chance that they're doing that to you when you're not around. So gossiping, and then another red flag that falls into that category is how they treat others. So friends, exes, bashing, gossiping, service staff. There's a meme that floats around on Facebook or all social media that talks about, I don't care, something, I can't remember how it goes, something about I don't care which side you roll your toilet paper from, or something else, but how you treat animals and how you treat other people, or how you treat wait staff. That's huge. If you have somebody that's constantly just tearing into a server every time you go out to eat, complaining about their meal, sending it back, gaslighting the server, getting confrontational, that's not a good sign, because that's going to circle back around to you at some point. If they treat other people that way, especially in public, that is going to circle back around to you at some point in time. So those are examples of the bashing, gossiping, how they treat others to look out for. And then, of course, one-sided relationships tend to be red flags, whether they're friendships, family members, romantic relationships, across the board. One-sided, if you're always the one that's reaching out and you're always the one that's initiating the conversation, and the only time you hear back from them is either if you start the conversation or if they need something, one-sided relationships kind of tend to be a red flag. Something's going on there. And if you're like me, you're going to try 2 or 3 times, maybe even 4 or 5 if you're really a glutton for punishment. And then you're just going to stop reaching out because you're not getting a response. And then the next time you'll hear from that person is when they need something. So think about your response then. So when it comes to a romantic relationship, here's an important one. And this is something a male friend told me years and years and years ago. And it turned out to be extremely true. And when I took that advice and applied it back over my past relationships and my current one, it absolutely turned out to be true. And what I mean by that is my current one at the time and then my current one now. And this goes along with that one-sided thing. If someone is truly interested in you, you will not have to chase them. You will not have to lay everything out, be available at their beck and call, or sit there wondering if they like you because you haven't heard from them. Good morning, Miss Shelley. If they are truly interested in you, and this is more specific to romantic relationships than anything, you won't have to chase them. You will know, because it will not be one-sided. It will be a constant give and take, back and forth. Hopefully not to the point of controlling behavior or codependency, but you won't have to wonder. And basically what he had said to me back then was if a guy likes you, you will know it, because he will be letting you know on a regular basis. He will be asking you what you were doing. He will be saying good morning, not, again, asking what you're doing in a controlling manner, and making himself available to you to find out when you can spend time together. So again, under that one-sided thing, if in the beginning of a relationship, you guys strike up a conversation, or a balance, and then all of a sudden the only time you ever hear from this person is when you reach out to them, or when they're alone, and it's 2:00 in the morning or something like that, or they're bored, then, and you're always the one initiating all the contact, that's a red flag. And that means that they are probably not as interested in you as whatever they may have made it sound like. And you need to address the red flag. All right, so let's talk about something nicer. Let's talk about green lights, because I'm running out of time and I don't want to keep you too long. This one's going to be a little bit longer. So green lights. Again, how they talk about others can be green flags also. If you hear that person at least 50% of the time or more saying good things about their exes. For example, my last breakup, I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want argument. I just realized that we had grown apart, and that's what I told that person. And for the most part, that's what I tell anybody else when it comes up. If it comes up, we grew apart. It's just that simple. Great guy. Really, truly. So how they talk about other people, again, can be a green light too. If they're great and they treat service staff, and people that they don't know, if they treat the janitor the same way they treat the CEO, you guys know the drill, then those can be green flags. How they talk about others is going to tell you a lot about the kind of person they are. They can, like, for me, even if I have to say something bad about somebody, usually I try to disclaimer it. It also depends on the context, and the people I'm with, how much they know about past history, whatever. If they can receive feedback, constructive criticism, etc. If you can ask them a question or tell them that they're doing something that bothers you, and it's met with understanding. Oh, Danielle, I can't even see all of that comment. I'll have to read it later. I'm glad that you're finding this relevant today. So if they can receive feedback, if you can say to them, like for me, standing up for myself was always a huge confrontational issue, and I was afraid of confrontation. I was afraid that standing up for myself was going to start an argument and that I was going to be told I was wrong and couldn't feel that way, okay? Because of previous relationships. So if you can say, hey, this happened and I have some concerns about it and here's why, and you can stay fairly unemotional and have a normal conversation with that person about it, then that's a green light. That's a green light that they're going to be reasonable and that you can have conversations with them without it becoming over emotional or over volatile. If they are not threatened by your need for self-care, my boyfriend knows I love to line dance. And if line dancing classes are going on in a bar, chances are I'm not going by myself anyway. But he also knows that if I really want to go and he can't go and I have friends going, he's going to be okay with that and has been in the past. He's not threatened by my need for self-care. If I come home or he comes home and I've got that look on my face and he's like, is everything okay? And I'm like, I just need a little time. He knows to leave me alone. He's not threatened by that. He doesn't assume that it has something to do with him. He understands that sometimes I just need a bigger space bubble than usual or a little time alone to decompress and sort out my thoughts and feelings. So again, if your self-care isn't threatening to them, then that's a green light. And that's with friends too. You know, some friends get mad. Well, why don't you ever want to have breakfast with me? I want to have breakfast with you at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Why can't you do that? Because I need to work out. Because if I don't work out, my sanity's off the rocker and I don't have time to spend with you, or I can't manage my time the same way and don't have time to spend with you. So if they're not threatened by your self-care needs, then that's a green light. If they're still looking out for you, even when you guys are mad at each other, again, friends, family, whatever, if they're still looking out for you, if you've had an argument and it's cold outside and they're still offering you their scarf or their jacket, that's a green light, because that means that argument, that isolated incident isn't bleeding over into everything. Does that make sense? If they're accountable, if they take responsibility when they do something wrong and they say, hey, I did this, I'm really sorry. If they take accountability and it's not, I'm really sorry, but you did this first and that's what caused it. There's a difference. Hey, I screwed up. For example, I had a brief situation over the weekend where I finally lost my noodle on somebody a little publicly during this event. I am not proud of it. Did he earn it? Probably. If I saw him today, would I apologize for my reaction? Yes, I would. And I would apologize by saying simply, I'm sorry that I lost control of myself. It wouldn't be, I'm sorry that I lost control of myself because you were a butthole. It wouldn't be, I'm sorry I lost my control of myself, but you did this, and you just pushed me over the edge. It would simply be, I'm sorry I lost control of myself. That's the kind of accountability we're talking about. If it feels easy to be with them. I've also many times told the story about my first female friend that was just positive all the time. And the more time I spent with her, the more time I wanted to spend with positive people, the more time I wanted to spend with her, because I was finally at a point in my life where I was starting to see the difference between positive attitudes and negative attitudes. And the more time I spent with her, the less I wanted to be around negative people and the less tolerance I had for negativity in my world. So quite simply, if it feels easy, if it doesn't feel like something you have to work at constantly, then that's probably a green light. And finally, again, back to that one-sided advice from that male friend of mine about how you know if somebody likes you. If their actions and their words match up, we have a tendency, and this is where a lot of these, I have a friend, actually I have a lot of friends who are single, they're in the dating world, and I've been there, and a guy shows interest, and his words by text or by phone are fabulous. I miss you, I want to see you, blah, blah, blah. But then every opportunity that comes up to get together, it doesn't happen. They don't show up. They don't respond other than when you don't have, you know what I mean? When you finally say, hey, I can get together on this night, they're always busy. When their actions don't match their words, that's a huge red flag. The green flag is when their actions and words match up. That is a green light, y'all. That is a clear green light. And I learned a long time ago, I'm a word girl, always have been, because I'm so good with words. Words are kind of my love language. But I've learned over time, don't go by words. Rarely go by actions even. Patterns will show themselves. But definitely make sure actions and words match up. And if they do, those are green lights. Those are absolute, brilliant, put the pedal to the metal green lights. Okay, how do you handle the red flags? This one's running longer than I expected today. Check yourself and be honest with yourself. This is a very slippery slope, okay? Because those of us that have been in some type of abusive relationship ever, we have a tendency to assume we're the problem. That's not what I'm talking about here. So like I said, it's a slippery slope. Check yourself. 4-hour minimum wait. If somebody explodes on you, and if it's by text and you have the ability to step back and just leave it alone for a little bit, do that. Be honest with yourself. If you're having a jealousy issue, or you're assuming the worst, or you're having a lack of trust, and I just ran into this recently, but I knew even as it was happening that I was the problem. I knew that I was feeling less than for a couple of different reasons. Like I wasn't feeling like I was pulling my weight. I'm carrying extra weight and I wasn't feeling as strong because I wasn't exercising as much. And those are where being self-sufficient and feeling strong are really where my self-esteem thrives from. So when I'm not feeling one or both of those, that negative thought pattern that I work so hard to keep at bay just starts going. It just fires right up. You can almost hear it. And that's essentially what happened to me a couple of weeks ago, where that started firing up. So I started perceiving different things as acts against me, or indiscretions or discrepancies or whatever. And that was across the board. It wasn't just with one person. It was across the board. And that for me was the light bulb, if you will, that there was something going on with me and that I needed to step back and I needed to check myself. So that's what I mean by check yourself. I don't mean assume automatically you are the problem. I mean step back, check yourself, be honest with yourself. Is there something going on with you? If this is not your normal behavior, is there something that's going on with you that's maybe caught messing with your perspective just a little bit? Communication without being overly emotional. We just kind of talked about that a little bit. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your own needs. That goes back to that self-care being a threat. Sacrificing your own needs versus compromise, not the same. Compromise is compromise. It means putting off your massage or your time alone for a day, not permanently. There's a difference. I hope that makes sense. Maintain healthy connections and surround yourself with people that boost you up. Just like that friend of mine that I just spoke of that was always positive about everything. In fact, the one time I saw her get angry, she was still smiling the whole time. It was a little scary. But that's what I'm talking about. Keep those people around you, people that make you feel better about yourself, not people that are picking on you all the time in front of others, like that previous friend I mentioned. So maintain the healthy connections. Surround yourself with people that boost you up. If you're going to put that effort in, put into those people that surround you and make you feel better about yourself and boost you just by being around them. If it's someone who, aligning with beliefs and values, I have this under handling the red flags. So I guess that makes sense. But if there's something about that person that continually doesn't align with your beliefs and values, that's an issue. Again, another friend got into a new relationship, was constantly leaving their young child in the care of their not as young child, who was around 12 or 13 at the time, was constantly leaving the younger child in the care of the 11 or 12-year-old to go spend the night at the home of the person that he was in the new relationship with. That's a little scary. If that's an issue for you, that kind of changes how you feel about that individual. Whether it's a close friend, whether it's somebody, a family member, whatever. If there's a misalignment with beliefs and values, you may need to distance yourself from that person. or call them out on it. Sometimes it depends on the person, whether you can get away with that or not. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Sudden changes in someone you've known a long time. So again, like I just said, my behavior, my reactions a couple weeks ago were out of the character for me. Maybe not for me several years ago, but they were out of character for me now. And so that was a sign that something was going on, that something more was happening. So if it's a sudden change, if these red flag behaviors are a sudden change in behavior for somebody that normally is not like that at all, then there may be something else going on, and that may be something to consider. It may be time to have just a conversation. Hey, what's going on? How are you? Is there anything you need to talk about? Not in an accusatory fashion. Because again, if it's something that is out of character for the individual, they've never acted like that before, then there may be something else going on. And if they've never acted like that before, but they're all of a sudden having explosive anger or physical issues, then there's a darn good chance there may be a medical issue behind it. So keep that in mind too. So if it's something that's out of character for somebody that you've known a long time, not somebody that you've known for a couple weeks, somebody you've known for years, and all of a sudden they're acting a little weird and they're not acting like themselves, there's a good chance there's other reasons behind it. And it may require a gentle, loving conversation. Or paying attention to whether or not there's other things going on. Like I said, if somebody is all of a sudden having explosive anger and there's not, a recent loss of someone in their life or something else going on, there may be some physical things happening that may be underlying. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, I am running long today, y'all. I'm sorry. But this was a new thing that I learned. So one of the ways to handle red flags, and this is especially in situations like the workplace, family, people that you don't have to be around all the time, it's called gray rocking. Now, I found this an interesting, and it kind of reminds me of when I say keeping people at arm's length. I've never heard of the gray rock method, so I just want to rattle this off real quick. What is the gray rock method? It's an attempt to stay neutral and disengaged when you have a situation where you have somebody, especially in the workplace, or a family member maybe, like I said, not somebody that you have to live with and deal with all the time, but still on a fairly regular basis, somebody that you can get away from. A lot of times I think this is going to apply to a work situation. The gray rock method, if you've got somebody that's gaslighting you, that's being a little mentally or emotionally abusive, coercive, etc., gray rocking. I know, Carla, I was like, what? What is that? You stay neutral and disengaged. They're usually trying to get a rise out of you, and the more you ignore them or the more you refuse to engage with them, the less likely they are to be able to do that. They'll get bored. They'll move on to something else. It's not considered a sustainable long-term solution to toxic behavior. But sometimes it does the trick, kind of like the ignore it and it'll go away thing. All right. You don't give them your attention. You keep interactions short and sweet. I have people that I do that with. I do that naturally. I didn't know there was a name for it. I just know that they're not people that I want to get into conversations with because they're going to start bashing somebody or they're going to bring up something that happened a long time ago or whatever. So I'm like, hey, how are you? How's the fam? I got to go. That type of thing. Sometimes it's even risky to ask, how's the fam? Hey, it's a nice day outside. Nice to see you. Psh, gone. So stay neutral and disengaged. Don't give them your attention. Keep interactions short and sweet. Don't give away personal information. And basically, again, neutral tone, avoiding eye contact. I have a couple of people that I do with that because I just do not want to engage. Give unemotional responses when provoked. Minimize your body language so that there's not a lot of facial expressions like smiling or frowning. Breath work. If they're constantly poking at you, you might need to ignore them. But that's essentially what gray rocking boils down to. But again, sometimes it can make the situation work. Sometimes it doesn't work if it's a situation of sexual harassment or discrimination of any kind that merits termination or merits reporting to a higher up. It's essentially kind of just trying to shut them down, not engaging, not responding. For example, it's a lot easier to do by text, right? If you've got somebody, an ex maybe, that's constantly poking at you, constantly blasting you by text, what's the best way to handle it? don't respond. Most of the time, that's the best way to handle it. Same idea. However, gray rocking, again, is not a long-term solution and may not work in situations that merit someone else's termination, like sexual harassment or discrimination. So I want you to remember these 3 things. With that said, who are you with that person? Everybody brings out a different beast. If around that person you find yourself tense, mean, acting in ways you don't normally act that are not positive, then that's probably not someone you need to be around. Know when to leave, know when to seek help, and know when to report to a higher up. Like we were just talking about the gray rocking. If you've got somebody that's really harassing you, ignoring them, disengaging is not making it go away. You need to take it to a higher up, human resources, whatever, especially if it's a situation of discrimination or sexual harassment. And there's other types of harassment that fall into hostile work environment. Those are stories for another day. Know when to seek help. If you like we just talked about, if you check yourself and you find, oh my gosh, I've got all this going on in my head and I'm overreacting to stupid stuff, then recognize that. But if it's not that, if you are having explosive anger all of a sudden and doing things you don't normally do, if you're talking about for the gray rocking, Carla, absolutely. If you see somebody that's, or if you or somebody you know is suddenly having extreme reactions and explosive anger or stuff like that you don't have an explanation for, then it may be time to speak with a physician, or a counselor. And if it is something if you've been in a relationship for a while and you missed all these red flags and you are now finding yourself in an abusive situation, it's important to know when to leave and to seek help with a local shelter, reach out to family members, etc. And again, if you're witnessing this in someone close to you and it's out of character, you may need to sit down and have a loving conversation with them or reach out to their counselor or physician. Okay, I ran really long today, y'all. This ended up being much more involved than I expected. Good thing I didn't dig any further, right? I hope you found it helpful. Carla, I will drop that link in the comments so that you can dig into the gray rocking. I found it very, very interesting. And again, if you found this helpful, please share. If you have a topic you'd like to see me cover, please feel free to message me, drop a comment. Try to stay away from politics, negativity, and religion as much as is possible when it comes to wellness. So appreciate you, and I hope you have a fabulous day, and most importantly, be well. I'll see you next week.